Welcome to episode 10 of The Culinary Citizen, a gastronomic guide to international relations. This is Sam Chappell-Sokol.
And Kelsey Marr. Each episode, we introduce you to a concept or theme connecting food and people around the world. This week, we are speaking to Anna Hoffman of the international nonprofit Cuisine Sans Frontières, or in English, Kitchen Without Borders.
Hello.
Welcome to the program, Anna. So, Anna is the business manager for Cuisine Sans Frontières, or Kitchen Without Borders, as we'll be calling it on the show, which is dedicated to establishing meeting places and training centers promoting culture and communication in crisis zones around the world. Kitchen Without Borders oversees the construction and startup support of culinary projects such as community kitchens, guest houses, or bakeries. And they've done work in South America, in Africa, in Eurasia. Anna is also the project leader for Kitchen Without Borders' Kitchen Battle event, which is the biggest fundraiser of the year, where two professional culinary teams make a 3-course meal with a basket of ingredients about which they learned just earlier in the day. The Kitchen Battle is, as I said, one of the largest fundraising events, and we look forward to hearing more about that, as well as the rest of the work that Kitchen Without Borders does. So thank you so much for being with us today, Anna.
Thank you for having me.
So first off, Anna, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got involved with this nonprofit?
My professional background is that I studied journalism and communications like 10 years ago. And I have always been involved with food and gastronomy, like on a private level, let's say. I've grown up in a family where food has always been very important, where it was normal to have a garden where you grow your own food. And it was just like a normal, but maybe not intended for me directly to get involved with this on a professional level as well. But it then happened when I was working in this communications agency, and my former boss and we just read this article in the newspaper about Kitchen Without Borders, which then was still a very tiny organization. It was almost 10 years ago, I'd say now. And in this article, they described what Kitchen Without Borders is doing. And there it was also mentioned that they are always interested in getting support, be it in communication, fundraising, whatever subject. It was just like a general call for support. And we thought this is a very interesting organization, which just attracted us by the idea, which we will be talking about later, I'm sure. And we called them and we met with David Höhner, the founder and longtime president of Kitchen Without Borders. And there it just started that we did some press release. We did like a small concept for a flyer. We just started to work together. Then one day we had like new colleagues in our office space, which was like a shared office. And as life goes, we found out that one of our new colleagues is the cousin of the wife of one of the founders of Cuisine Sans Frontières, like world is small. Mm-hmm. And everyone just started to get more and more involved. Our colleagues, they did like the programming of a new website, and the connection got closer and closer. And by the beginning of 2011, the board of Cuisine Sans Frontières, Kitchen Without Borders, they had decided to look for someone as a business manager, which by then mainly meant to answer emails in a decent time, like not waiting 3 weeks, because most of the people involved were cooks, and they are mainly cooking. They are not sitting in front of the computer. So this is when they came up with this idea, and they asked me if I'm interested in doing it. And I was very interested, of course. And that's how it all started. And it just, that's the beginning of my direct professional history with the Kitchen Without Borders. And we just continued, and the organization grew, and my amount of work for the organization grew, and until now when I'm working 3 days a week for Kitchen Without Borders as a not full time but a big part time employee for this organization.
What originally drew you to Kitchen Without Borders?
It's the apart from my personal interest in food and my personal belief that food is one of the main and elementary tools to get people together, to create social events, to create communication, to create social life. It was also the way how they worked. It was from the beginning, and we still stick to it, the way that we want to do as much as we can, and all the fundraising we do and all the work we do, as much of it possible should directly go into the projects. We really try to keep the so-called administration as low as possible, so to really be able to invest almost all the money we fundraise directly into the project, which gives us, as we also hear from people who donate money, for example, to our organization, a huge credibility, because they know, okay, with the money I donate, it goes directly into the project, and it does not mainly finance a large administration part.
So, from the very beginning, you seem to have been involved since the early times. How have you seen the organization develop over the years? What changes have you seen? And what needs has the organization been filling since its conception?
Well, the development was very, let's say, organic or very natural. We really grew steadily on all levels. Like, it started with the board, which at the beginning was only 3 people. Then it changed to 5. Then they decided to have someone doing the business management, what I'm doing. The projects grew together with the amount of money that we could collect. Then the publicity we got through media, through people, through members. As we are an association, you can become a member, and the more members we got, the more people knew about us. It was just a constant growth through the last 10 years. Like 2015, we had the 10th anniversary, and it was just a very constant growth, which allowed us to invest and to become bigger, but in a very natural way. It was not like a forced growth, and I think this also made it very sustainable. We are now on a level, we have decided last year to really want to continue to grow and to make it something that lasts. And thanks to those first 10 years we had, where we have created this strong basis with members we have for 10 years, with people who have been, let's say, food suppliers for the kitchen battle we will talk about later. They have been very loyal to us, and we have been loyal to them. So this also gave us a basis on which we can count and on which we can continue further. So this is the development of the organization, which is, in my point of view, also very healthy. Let's say it was not a forced growth that could just break down again.
Right. Interesting. So, yeah, tell us a little bit more. I mean, on the ground, it's interesting to hear about the history of the organization, and like what, from the beginning until now, what projects has it done? What is the meat and potatoes, to use a food food phrase? What is the mission, and what sort of work does CSF, or Kitchen Without Borders, do?
The basic idea behind Kitchen Without Borders, which I found very convincing, is that in German we have this very cute word, which is bites. This means, this is kind of a restaurant, but it's not like a very fancy restaurant. It's just a normal restaurant which you have in a small neighborhood, where people go and meet, and there you have the regulars who know each other and who know the cooks and who know the owner of the restaurant. And we believe that in this kind of restaurant, this is where life happens. This is where you meet, you fall in love, you separate, you celebrate birthdays, you celebrate funerals. This is where all the social life happens. And in areas or in villages or communities where this kind of place doesn't exist anymore, there is no chance for social life or a cultural life to establish again. If maybe before a conflict it had been there, but it's not possible to exist. And we want to offer this place as a neutral host, kind of. So we go to places where after, let's say, a war, a civil war, a natural disaster, this is where we go and we create this place to offer to the people. Because we are not an organization who wants to, although we are called Kitchen Without Borders, we are not going to teach the people how to cook, because the people, they know how to cook. And we don't want to teach them to cook Swiss dishes. But we want to offer them the place where they can cook and where they can cook for their community and where they can eat together. And if you have two persons who maybe don't talk to each other anymore, but they just sit opposite on a table and one says to the other, "Can you please pass me the salt?" This is already the beginning of conversation, and this is the beginning of social life, of community life. And this is what we try to do in all our projects. So we started doing this, for example, in Colombia. This was the very first project in San Jose de Apartado. This is a small village of people who had been very hardly influenced by the civil war in Colombia. They suffered from the attacks from the paramilitares. They suffered from the effect of the attacks from the FARC. And then one day they said, okay, we are fed up. Just let us in peace. And they declared like a peace. They declared themselves as a peace community, a neutral place there where arms, for example, are not allowed. And they just said, we don't want to get involved with this conflict anymore. And they were poor farmers, and everyone who could work, they just left during the day to the fields, and they worked, they planted the food, they harvested. And the people who were working on the fields, they managed to eat during the day. But for example, the children, pregnant women, old people, they just remained in the village and they didn't have food anymore. And we created a small building with a community kitchen where women from this village cooked for those remaining in the village throughout the day, and as well as they created a meeting point for the people at night. So people could meet again, share, exchange, have discussions. And this started to help to create the community, the social feeling again amongst this village, which then, of course, also strengthened their independency towards the exterior threats. This is like the first project. Then we had a community kitchen in Brazil, in Salvador da Bahia, in a favela. Then we had the first project in Africa, which still is in Orwa. This is in the northwest of Kenya, in an area where there are several tribes fighting each other for years, also living among each other peacefully. But as, for example, weapons came up, those fights, they became more and more violent. Then there is the environmental change, which makes that the farming gets more and more difficult. They are semi-nomads, so their animals didn't find places to eat, to have water, and all the entire conflict got more intense. And there we created this peace meeting place as well, which we call the intercultural center, because those tribes are really different cultures. And nowadays it's a restaurant with a meeting place, with sleeping facilities, with a garden, with some goats who provide food as well. And the idea is that people from the different tribes, they work there, so they get to realize that they are not only enemies, but they really work together. And there has been throughout the years times of more intense conflicts and times of less conflict. But this place has always been respected by all the different tribes involved. There are two main tribes involved, Pokot and the Turkana, and they have always respected this place as a neutral place. And this is thanks to the fact that someone exterior came and created the place. Apart from the fact that those tribes, they would not have had the financial, the resources, to build such a place, because you still have to build a building, a kitchen, have all the material. But it just helped that it's someone neutral from outside. And as a Swiss organization, you always get this neutral credit, obviously. So this place always exists, and we have handed over to the local partner last December. And this local organization is a community-based organization which now continues to run this restaurant.
It's really interesting to hear about that. Like I before I started studying how food is used in tool diplomacy, I was also looking at international development. So this is a beautiful representation of the combination of both of those fields. I've written about culinary diplomacy. I'm sure listeners have heard my definition of the phrase multiple times now, using food and cuisine as a tool or instrument to create cross-cultural understanding in the hopes of improving the interactions and cooperation. Exactly. So when I hear you speak, I hear these are like amazing projects testing out a theory that hasn't really proven itself in any sort of academically rigorous way. And when I've been writing my pieces, the number one criticism I get is, how does this work? Like, what proof do you have? Are there any statistics? Are there any numbers behind this theory? And you've been doing these projects for almost a decade now, and I'm wondering if you do have any sort of monitoring and evaluation numbers, or any of those tools that are out there to analyze the projects and reflect on them and say, this has worked, this hasn't worked, these are where we should put our resources, this is the kind of project, and a theory of change as to why does this kitchen space work between these two tribes, whereas nothing before that, even if an international NGO came in before, nothing like that has worked before. So do you guys have that sort of capacity to come up with an M&E monitoring evaluation type of analysis?
Well, we don't have the scientific analysis that academics might want, but of course, according to not only the tribes involved, that if we stick to the example of Kenya, but also people, other NGOs in the area, or people from further away, they confirm that this place is accepted as a neutral place. This gets visible, for example, in small aspects, like people don't go there with weapons, and they accept that this is not allowed, and this is something that in conflict areas very often is just normal. Everyone walks around with his weapon in case of something, or in case of he or she had to protect him or herself. But there is this very nice picture we have from the eating area of this place called Calabash in Orwa in Kenya. and there is this huge sign which says no weapons in the restaurant, and people respect. And we have organized throughout the years several like bigger get-togethers additional to the daily business in this restaurant. So, and to bring, for example, those tribes, they have very difficult to understand clan structures or hierarchies, which we don't get at first view. And if you manage to get people together, sitting around a table, talking to each other, who haven't been sitting in the same room for years, for decades, I think this is a proof. It's not an academic scientific proof, but it's a proof that this place works. And this is what has shown us that the concept we use is the right concept in our view of what conflict work can mean.
Yeah, that's as good, or that's as good as it can get, is to see it working.
Exactly.
You don't need numbers to prove anything if you can see that this is working. So that's great. That's really interesting.
And then of course we have, throughout the entire work we've done, we also realized that the educational part is a very important part. It's an important part to show people what the processes are in a kitchen, for example, and that's what then we did with the first project in Georgia, in Skaltubo, and now which is part of the new project at the Napo River in Ecuador, that we also implement the gastronomy education part, which is always a very basic education, a very basic cooking course, but this allows people who are far away from, let's say, the regular academic life, or very far from just basic school. They get the basic education in cooking, in processes of cooking, in hygiene, work in a kitchen, and this allows them to get a job afterwards in, for example, tourism industry. That's like the main goal in the Ecuador project we have now. So this is an additional plus in this kitchen work, that you also can use the kitchen to offer education to people who would not have the means to get an education in the normal system, let's say.
You've mentioned several projects, Anna. What are the steps from beginning to end for a project?
Well, the projects usually start or the last 10 years, the first projects we did always started with someone contacting us, and just be it an individual person, be it a local organization, saying, listen, we've heard about you, or we got your contact through a friend of a friend, or through an organization that knows you. And they suggest an area with a basic concept, with a basic idea of what we could do. This is, for example, what happened in Kenya. This is what happened in Georgia, in Skaltubo. This is what happened in Colombia. And then we have this basic concept, and usually one person of the board or two of the board plus me, we go there and we meet the people who are there. We always want to meet the local organization with whom we could work, because one of the main criteria for us to do a project is that there is a local partner organization. That's like for us the basic, because we plan after from 3 to 5 years of that we have supported the project, that we have created the project and implemented it, we will hand it over to this local organization, so they can continued the work in their own style, in their own rhythm, but we kind of did the initial push to get this project going. So it's for us, it's elementary to have this local partner from the beginning. Then you meet the local partner, you get to visit the place, you check out like basic information like which are the suppliers for this for cement to build a kitchen, which are the suppliers where you can buy cooking pots, and like it gets very detailed or very pragmatic very soon, because we don't want to lose time in discussing theoretical aspects. We want to get the work done. So once we have met these partners, we go back and we discuss with the board of Kitchen Without Borders here in Switzerland. And if the board agrees that this project fulfills the idea of the aim of Kitchen Without Borders, we get the project started. And then we establish the detailed concept together with the local partner. We define a budget that we can provide for the following year, or maybe even for the current year if it's at the beginning. And then we look for we check out how many volunteers are needed. We provide the volunteers who come from Switzerland and travel there to help, for example, in building a kitchen building, or who try to teach people certain elements of the processes in the kitchen. And then after let's say a year, two, the project runs on its own and we overview it. We have like a consulting job more or less. And then depending on the project, after a period of 3 to 5 years, we hand it over to the local partner. And we always keep in touch with the local organization which takes it over. And sometimes afterwards they do it in a different way, not the way we expected it. It continues, but maybe not as we expected it to continue. And sometimes it continues the same way, or it gets, maybe sometimes there's a small pause and then they restart. This is also sometimes it feels like parents who leave their children just on their own, and you're still there and you watch it, but the idea is always that the project has its individual life, let's say, in the end.
We'd love to hear a little bit more specifically. Now we understand the whole process. Can you talk about the most recent project, which I guess you said the founder, David, is working on right now? We heard it's happening in Ecuador, in Rio Napo, but can you talk about what's going on there? We read that there's going to be a swimming river kitchen, like a boat in the river. So let's hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah. The project takes place, as you mentioned, in Ecuador. It's in the area of there is this huge jungle this is a part with an immense variety and biodiversity. It's a huge jungle, and there is this river called Napo. So we call the project the Rio Napo. And there are lots of indigenous people, indigenous tribes, community living along this river. But this whole area has been opened for international companies to exploit oil, because there's lots of oil. And to exploit oil, as we all know, you have to destroy massive parts of the forest. And by destroying this forest, the indigenous people, which mainly are hunters, collectors, but mainly hunters, they lose their existence, because the jungle which provides them live food is destroyed. this already causes conflicts among the new settlers and among the indigenous people. It causes conflicts among the indigenous tribes because they need to enlarge their area where they go hunting, for example. Plus, you have this village or this town, which is called Goka in common speaking, but the real name is San Francisco de Orellana. And there are those people who are working for the oil companies. There are the indigenous people who cannot live in the forest anymore, and they go to the town, but they don't get a job because very often they cannot read, or they don't have an education. You have the new settlers working for the oil companies. It's like a melting pot of there are refugees from Colombia. It's a very intense atmosphere in this village. And from this, like based in or starting in this town, there is this river, and we want to fulfill two goals in this project. And the first goal is to create or to strengthen the community among those indigenous communities, to maintain their communal, their social life in this area, to not lose this indigenous life, to also strengthen them among themselves, to protect themselves against, for example, oil exploiting companies, to fight for their rights. But for this, they have to be strengthened or to stand together. And then we also want to help those who cannot who cannot feed themselves, who don't have money to feed their families, to help them get into the job market in Ecuador. And the job market in Ecuador is in the whole country, but also in this area, is very much based on tourism. So the first part, to strengthen the communities and to also just to start first with gaining the confidence, the trust of those communities that you really want to work with them. That's where the idea of the swimming kitchen comes from, because just on a practical way of thinking, there are streets, but the best way to travel through this forest is on this river. So the kitchen travels along the river and stops in those different communities where we organize cooking events together with cultural program to bring people together, to make them eat together, to make them communicate, to strengthen their bindings among themselves. And the swimming kitchen has the advantage that people who are in the villages, like for example the city like Coca, where we will have this cooking school, the people who have learned or who have been taught cooking, they can afterwards work on the swimming river kitchen as well. These cooking classes are very basic courses. It's not like an academic education, but it's a very basic course which still gives them, and we will be mainly talking about indigenous people as students, but there are also other people who are very poor, who don't get a chance to get into the education system or to get into a job market. So they are allowed to get into this cooking school, and to get in the end they get a paper which proves that they have done this course. They learn some basic techniques, how to cut onions, how to work in a kitchen, and with this they can find a job in the tourism industry, which is mainly ecotourism, is very strong in this area. So it can be either an entrance ticket to this tourism industry, or at least they can also work on this swimming cooking kitchen and help to strengthen the indigenous community among or along the river Napo. This is not very shortly, but I try to be
No,
as short as possible. Yeah, the idea of the project.
yeah, thank you so much. That's enlightening, and I look forward to reading more about it and
You
seeing how
will.
the project goes. Um,
Maybe I can add something. It's the biggest project we've done so far, and it's also the biggest project because we're working with other big international organizations, um, like from Germany, from Switzerland, from Ecuador. So it really puts Kitchen Without Borders in a international context, and we get a lot of support and also appreciation for the idea and the concept of our work, also from this big organization, which I guess is a proof as well that the concept is not bad, or let's say it's a good concept.
Great. Maybe our listeners can look you guys up and read more. Want to tell our listeners where they can find you?
Yeah,
Twitter, Facebook. What's the best way to
everywhere.
learn more about the website or about the project?
They can find us on kitchenwithoutborders.ch or cuisinesansfrontières.ch. You can find us on Facebook through the name Cuisine Sans Frontières, and you can find us on Twitter. So we are there. The website is in English, so everyone who's interested will certainly find us.
Perfect. So you heard Anna. Look them up. We're going to take a quick break. After that, we'll get back and chat more, learn more about Kitchen Battle, which is Anna's specialty within the organization. So stay tuned.
Thanks for joining us again. Today on The Culinary Citizen, we're here with Anna Hoffman from Kitchen Without Borders, and we're just about to begin our conversation about the kitchen battle. So, Anna, can you please paint the picture of the night of the annual kitchen battle?
Yeah, as you mentioned in the intro, the kitchen battle is our main fundraising tool. We've started doing this I just maybe explain a little bit of the history of it. We started doing this in 2009, and the idea of the kitchen battle actually has been created in one of our projects, in the first project in Colombia, when one day it was just rain was pouring down and you could not continue the work for this building we were creating there. And two of our, by those days, members of the board, Ivo and Tom, they were just discussing about what could we do to raise more funds for Kitchen Without Borders. And as they are both cooks, and as cooks, they like to tease each other about what the other does cook, and they were like, yeah, your pizza, I can do it better, but your hot dog, no, I can easily do it. It was just this kind of conversation, who is the better cook. So they ended up with the idea, why don't we actually do this? Why don't we actually cook against each other and have this battle right in front? And they came back from Colombia and started to work out the concept, which is that two restaurant teams cook on stage for every night around 150 guests. They cook on stage for and in front of the public. And then the guests, they decide after each course if they have preferred team A or team B. So as a guest, you eat each course from each team. And as they do 3 courses plus a pre-starter, you actually eat 8 courses. And after every course, you vote and you say, I prefer team A or team B. And at the end of the evening, you have a winning team. And it's always 2 semifinals plus a final. And the teams, they cannot just cook whatever they want, because we want the guests to really be able to compare. So the teams, they get there in the morning at 10 o'clock, and we present them a food basket with about usually like 12 to 14 ingredients, which is meat, vegetable, fruit, dairy products, like just a combination of ingredients with which you can create the menu, of course, but which are also not obvious maybe to combine. And then they have 2 hours to discuss in their teams and to create this menu. Then at 12 o'clock, they get to the stage and they write down their menu, the 3 courses plus the pre-starter. And that's when they start cooking. And no matter what happens, if the rice gets burned or if the vegetables are too salty, what they have written down, that's what they have to serve at night. As they are professionals, things like burnt rice don't happen very often, but it can happen. It has happened. And they start cooking, and they really, we have them on stage, and they have 2 identical kitchens on stage together, and they spend there 7 hours until at 7 o'clock the guests arrive and start eating. And then, as I said before, vote after each course which team they liked best. Then there is the jury as well. There are 5 members of the jury each night. Those are either professionals from the restaurant gastronomy part, but those are also journalists, people like, let's say, artists, singers, politicians. It's just an interesting group of people who, at the end of the evening, before the vote of the public gets announced, the jury members, each of them announces their result or their favorite team as well. And the jury, not unlike the public, they don't vote on each course, but they just decide at the end of the evening which team they liked best. So they of course they can argument why, because of the dessert or because of the main course or because of the starter, but in the end they have to decide or they have to give their vote to one team. And as we are in Switzerland and we like the people to have the main power, the people or the guests, in the end, they have more points to give than the jury. So the jury, they can give 25 points, and the guests, they have 30 points to give. But like this, at the end of the evening, you have a winning team, and the winning team, it's always Thursday to Saturday, the winning team of Thursday and the winning team of Friday, they cook against each other on stage in the final on Saturday. And the winning team on Saturday will have to cook again the year after.
Oh, this is more intense than I thought. This sounds really. How often do teams crumble, or does the rice burn, or do the teams stay pretty professional and really put out some really good food?
The level of food is very high, because I don't know if this is an attitude of chefs or kitchen people, but they really want to show what they can, and they want to show their knowledge and their technique. Of course, it can happen. We had this famous night where 2 teams in the same course, they did risotto, and one was excellent and one was just not so excellent. And the people, they really had like the direct comparison. Or it can happen that they do ice cream and it's not like frozen enough, or there are small things that happen, but in general, they do a very, very, very good job. And usually every year there are like 1 or 2 plates which just remain, and everyone just recalls it and talks about it again and says, you remember this plate. And what is the nice thing for the restaurants, as they are forced to cook with those ingredients that they don't know until at 10 o'clock in the morning, they dare to do creations that they would not dare in their restaurants. That's what they say very often, because in a restaurant you always try to do plates which certainly will please your guests. But at the kitchen battle, the people, they come, the guests, they want to try, and it's also part of the concept or part of the pleasure for the guests to eat food or to eat a plate which maybe you would not choose in the restaurant, but here, as it is just served and you cannot choose what you eat, because the team has just defined it at lunchtime, they both, like guests, they tend to eat things they wouldn't maybe not order in a restaurant, and cooks, they dare to create the menu that they would maybe not dare to in the restaurant. So I think it's a very interesting combination for both.
Are there any dishes that you look back on fondly in particular?
I remember one team doing meatballs with what's it called? Cornflakes. This is like
Okay.
like a cereal you eat for breakfast.
Yeah, cornflakes.
And it was just there in this food basket, and they didn't know where to put it, and they didn't want to put it in the dessert, which would have been like the more classical approach maybe. But they created meatballs which had a crunchy aspect thanks to these cornflakes, and they were like some of the best meatballs I've ever had.
Wow.
Or there was this one dessert with parsley and ice cream, and it had this very interesting combination of salty and dessert wise aspect, but it was a very interesting combination, and it was very beautiful, like on the plate, because it was white and green, and it was something that no one ever had expected.
Now, are most of these dishes in the restaurant teams, is this mostly Swiss food, or are there challenges to incorporate cuisines or cooking techniques or ingredients from the countries in which Kitchen Without Borders work?
It is mainly, but it's not like, let's say, typical Swiss cuisine, because the restaurants which participate, they might have their international cuisine anyway. There are international ingredients from time to time, but then on the other hand, as we do in the project where we cook with local food, we prefer to cook with local food here as well, and not get mangoes to the kitchen battle, because there are lots of nice fruits in Switzerland as well, and we don't want, on the other hand, to make people in the project cook Swiss food, but we want them to cook with the local food, their local meals.
That makes sense. What is the donor feedback, or what do supporters of the organization think about this event? Does this feed into the overall mission of CSF or Kitchen Without Borders?
I think what is very convincing for the people, for the guests, and which also makes that we have like lots of regulars in these events, is that it somehow transports the idea of Kitchen Without Borders into this event, because it is also sitting together at the table and having a lot of exchange throughout the evening. And we don't have like tables of 2 or tables of 4, but tables of 16. So people are already, like, by the way they are seated, but also by the concept of the evening, because you always discuss about the food. You're like, oh, why do you prefer this? No, I prefer that one. And what do you think about it? Everyone gets somehow an expert in food, and this makes people talk about the food, and this makes people exchange, and this brings people together at the table, or even if there are people who don't know each other. And this is the same concept that we also have in our projects, that we want to bring people together around the table. And then additionally, what is a very good opportunity, of course, of the kitchen battle, is that there are always 2 breaks, and then we can present the project of Cuisine Sans Frontières, of Kitchen Without Borders, because For example, last year we presented a new project at the Napo River that we've been talking about before. And then people, they know that they know directly, or they see directly what they are donating for. It's not just a letter that you receive or a flyer and the project is very far away. Or we have had people from the project telling or talking to the public on stage about their experience in the project. So the connection to the project is very direct, and people really see where their money goes to. And then there is a third aspect, I think, which is important in our project and which is also very important in the kitchen battle. This is the work of the volunteers. Neither the project nor the kitchen battle we could do without volunteers. This is like a very strong basis we had, and that we appreciate strongly, that there are so many people who support us and who just donate their time and offer their skills to make, be it the project or the kitchen battle, to make this possible. And they are involved there, and the guests see how many people are working there, and this is kind of the symbol for all the people who are also working in the project.
Great. Anna, how do you guys choose the chefs to compete? Do they just volunteer, or is there kind of a vetting process?
Well, at the beginning, we had to convince our friends and restaurants we know to participate, because still, I mean, it's, as a restaurant, you have to send 4 people to participate. I mean, lots of restaurants, they cannot send 4 people because then they would have to shut down for 2 days.
Yeah.
But they have to send at least 2 from the restaurant, and then they can add former colleagues or friends or whoever they think fits best to their team. But it's 2 days where they have to be present, because you never know. The ones who win on Thursday and Friday, obviously they have to cook again on Saturday, and the ones who lose, they are invited to eat on Saturday. So they have to be free on both days anyway. This, at the beginning, we needed some convincing work from our side. Nowadays, we are in the very lucky position that it is a very known event in Zurich, but now since last year also in Basel and Lucerne, and for 3 years now in Bern, which are other Swiss cities. And the restaurants, they send us emails to apply for the participation in the kitchen battle. And what we do is we want to have a combination of kind of different restaurants on stage, different restaurants which or different styles, let's say, be it a big hotel kitchen and a very small, very new, very innovative restaurant, or a very classic restaurant, like just to have different styles. And because this is, on one hand, of course, interesting for the guests to have different cooking styles, but then it also is a symbol for the different people we bring together in our projects, and which we also want to bring together in the kitchen battle. So it also always has this involvement aspect in everything we do.
So Anna, what is your universal truth about food?
There's this German word for food. I don't know if there's a translation in English. I don't know if Weihen would be the correct translation. I don't know. Anyway, it means, there's this word Lebensmittel, which basically means food in German, and it consists of 2 words which mean means of life. And for me, this is like the perfect description of what food is. Food is the mean of life, because it is elementary for human existence. It is elementary for social contact. It is elementary for communication. It is elementary for culture. It is elementary for everything that makes us not only human, but it makes us a culture or a community. So for me, without food, to say it in an extreme way, there is no life, I would say. So that's my universal truth about food.
Thanks, Anna. This has all been very enlightening. We look forward to following your work. As Anna mentioned earlier, you can find Cuisine Sans Frontières or Kitchen Without Borders. They have a website, very complete. Great breakdowns of each of the projects. I was really impressed with that, including history, funding, budget, all that kind of thing, which is great. You're also on Twitter as well as Facebook.
Yeah.
Anywhere else? Can we see pictures of your work on Instagram or anything like that?
Not yet, but
Okay.
you might one day.
Soon enough. Well, Anna, thank you so much for joining us on The Culinary Citizen today.
Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thanks.
Of course. And thank you all. Thanks to all the listeners for listening to us today on The Culinary Citizen. You can connect with us, as always, on Facebook. We're The Culinary Citizen. You can subscribe to our podcast on iTunes. If you'd like to leave a review, feel free. If you ever want to reach us or are interested in reaching out to Anna, feel free to send us an email at culinarycitizen@gmail.com. We look forward to bringing you the next episode of The Culinary Citizen. Until next time.